She only wanted justice. He only wanted power. But neither of them knew that between betrayal and revenge, a horse would appear to change everyone's fate. The mountains of Millbrook were shrouded in thick fog at dawn, as if nature itself wanted to hide the secrets about to emerge. Emily Parker adjusted the shawl over her shoulders while observing the landscape from her window in the historic inn. At 28, her green eyes carried a determination that contrasted with the delicacy of her features. Her wheelchair, far from limiting her, seemed to be just another instrument of her indomitable personality. "More coffee, dear?" asked Mrs. Martha, the inn's proprietor, entering the room with a steaming tray. "Thank you, but I can't eat anything," Emily replied, firmly holding the folder of documents in her lap. "Today's the day, Mrs. Martha. After months of investigating, I finally have what I need to discover the truth about what happened to Dad." The elderly housekeeper frowned with concern. "My dear, sometimes it's better to leave certain things alone. Your father was a good man, but his business dealings were more complicated than I imagined," Emily completed, opening the folder and showing dozens of meticulously organized documents. False contracts, suspicious transactions, partnerships that make no sense, and at the center of it all, Harrison Morris. The name of her father's former partner left her lips as if it burned. Harrison had always been considered a trusted family friend, the one who consoled Emily after her father's sudden disappearance under still murky circumstances. But the more she dug into the family company's archives, the more she discovered cracks hidden beneath the facade of prosperity that had sustained the Parker name for so long. "Emily, promise me you'll be careful." Mrs. Martha held her hand tenderly. "There are things in this town that important people prefer to keep buried. That's exactly why I need to act." Emily closed the folder with determination. "The tourist train leaves in an hour. I'm going to meet Harrison during the trip and confront him with this evidence. He can't continue manipulating the family business while hundreds of small producers in the region suffer the consequences." Outside, the elegant tourist train was preparing for another journey through the steep curves and breathtaking landscapes of the Blue Ridge Mountains. The tracks cutting through the town's colonial landscapes glistened wet with morning dew, and the distant whistle echoed among the hills like a premonition. Emily maneuvered her wheelchair to the station, watching the other passengers board. Excited tourists, local residents, and there near the main car, the unmistakable silhouette of Harrison Morris. Tall, elegant, with his well-maintained 60 years, and a smile that always seemed more a mask than a sincere gesture. He greeted her with his usual cordiality. "Emily, my dear, what a surprise to see you here. How are you, my child?" "I'm fine, Harrison. Actually, I was waiting for this opportunity to talk to you alone," she replied, maintaining a cordial tone, but with a firm gaze. Of course. We have a lot to talk about regarding the business. You know you can count on me for anything, don't you? Your father trusted me completely." His words sounded hollow to Emily's ears. During the past few months, after discovering irregularities in contracts signed by her father, she began to question everything involving Harrison. The family company, which should have been thriving, showed signs of serious financial problems. Money had disappeared, lands were sold without her knowledge, and suspicious contracts pointed to a much larger scheme. The train began to move, winding through the mountain slopes. Emily settled the folder in her lap, feeling the weight not only of the documents, but of all the responsibility she carried. She was the last representative of the Parker family, and she would not allow her father's memory to be tarnished by omission or cowardice. "Harrison, we need to talk about some irregularities I discovered in the company's contracts," she said, determined not to postpone the confrontation any longer. His smile faltered for an instant, almost imperceptibly, but Emily noticed. "Irregularities? I don't know what you're talking about, my dear. All business was conducted with complete transparency." "Then perhaps you can explain why there are 3 different contracts for the same property, each with completely different values," Emily opened the folder and removed the documents. "Or why there are million-dollar transfers to shell companies registered in tax havens." The car swayed gently on the tracks, and with it, Emily's hands also trembled, not from fear, but from adrenaline. She knew she was about to cross a line of no return, but the truth about her family's legacy was worth any risk. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit like. Tell us what city you're watching from. We continue. The train snaked along the slopes of the Blue Ridge Mountains, and the rhythmic sound of the wheels on the tracks created a hypnotic soundtrack for the confrontation unfolding. Harrison Morris observed the documents that Emily had spread on the small table between them, and his cordial expression began to give way to something more calculated. "Emily, my dear, you're letting yourself be led by misinterpretations," he said, adjusting his tie knot with a gesture that tried to appear casual. "Business has its complexities. Your father understood that perfectly." "My father trusted you, Harrison, and you took advantage of that trust," Emily replied, pointing to a specific contract. "This property was sold for $500,000 according to this document, but here, in this other contract with the same date, the value is $2 million. Where did that difference go?" The car swayed on a sharper curve, and Harrison took advantage of the movement to get closer to Emily, lowering his voice. "You don't understand the magnitude of what you're meddling with. There are much greater interests at stake here. Interests that protect not just our region, but the entire economic development of Virginia." "What interests are those?" Emily was not intimidated. "The same ones that justify creating shell companies? Or perhaps those that explain why small producers in the region are losing their lands to a mysterious dam project?" The mention of the dam made Harrison freeze for a moment. Emily realized she had hit the mark. "How did you know about the dam?" he asked, and for the first time his voice carried a barely disguised threatening tone. "Dad left notes, fragments of conversations, contract drafts, numbers that didn't add up." Emily opened another section of the folder. "At first I thought it was his paranoia, but now I see he had been investigating you for months before he disappeared. Your father was ill, Emily. In the last months of his life he was confused, suspicious of everyone. You know that." "He wasn't sick." Emily hit her hand on the table, making the documents tremble. "He was discovering that you had been stealing from the family for years, and when he got close to the truth—" "Be careful what you're going to say," Harrison interrupted, and his mask of cordiality finally fell completely. "Unfounded accusations can have serious consequences." The tension in the car was palpable. Other passengers, absorbed by the landscape parading past the windows, remained oblivious to the drama unfolding just a few feet away. Emily felt a shiver, but not from cold. It was the sensation of finally seeing the true face of someone she had always considered part of the family. "They're not unfounded," she whispered, removing a sealed envelope from the folder. "Olivia contacted me last week. Your former secretary knows all your secrets, Harrison, and she didn't disappear by accident, did she?" Harrison's face paled. Olivia had been his personal secretary for more than 10 years, knew every move of the company, every offshore account, every manipulated contract. If she had really spoken with Emily. "Where is Olivia?" he asked, trying to maintain his composure. "In a safe place, and with copies of everything you tried to hide," Emily lied, knowing that Olivia had disappeared without a trace. But Harrison's reaction confirmed her deepest suspicions. The train entered a more isolated stretch of the railway, where cliffs flanked the tracks and the dense vegetation of the forest swallowed any sound. It was one of the most spectacular parts of the route, but also the most dangerous. Emily had always loved this part of the journey, but now she felt a growing uneasiness. "You don't know who you're messing with." Harrison stood up, walking to the window. "This dam project will generate thousands of jobs, will bring development to the entire region. Some people need to make sacrifices for the greater good. Sacrifices like the destruction of entire natural reserves, like the eviction of families who have lived on those lands for generations." Emily maneuvered her chair to face him. "Or sacrifices like making my father disappear when he discovered the truth." "Your father had an accident, a regrettable accident, but an accident," Harrison repeated the official version, but his voice carried a tension that belied his words. "Accident?" Emily laughed bitterly. "A man who knew these roads like the back of his hand simply has an accident on a curve he'd traveled thousands of times, and conveniently just days before an important meeting with foreign investors. The Sihur. Train slowed down as it approached a particularly steep curve. Through the window, Emily could see the abyss that extended dozens of yards below the tracks. It was a breathtaking scenario, but one that now gave her a feeling of vulnerability she had never experienced before. Emily, you're an intelligent young woman. You have your whole life ahead of you. Harrison turned to her, and his look had completely changed. It would be a shame if something happened to you too. Accidents can repeat in families, don't you think? Emily's heart raced. For the first time since she began her investigation, she felt real fear. Not just for what could happen to her, but for the implicit confirmation of what she suspected about her father's fate. Harrison wasn't just a dishonest partner. He was someone capable of anything to protect his interests. The train was now traveling through one of the most isolated parts of the route, where the silence of the forest was broken only by the metallic sound of wheels on tracks. Emily felt the weight of Harrison's gaze upon her, and each word of his veiled threat still echoed in her ears. But far from being intimidated, the confirmation of her suspicions only strengthened her determination. "You're admitting you were irresponsible for what happened to my father," Emily said, her voice firm despite her racing heart. "I'm not admitting anything," Harrison replied, moving through the car with the agility of someone who knew every sway of the train. "Just warning you about the dangers of meddling in matters you don't understand." Emily observed that they were alone in that section of the car. The other passengers had concentrated in the panoramic car to enjoy the landscape, leaving them isolated. Amid that silent confrontation, the realization of the vulnerability of her situation hit her like lightning. "People know where I am today," she lied, trying to create a safety net. "If anything happens to me, like they knew where your father was on the night he disappeared." Harrison interrupted, definitively confirming what Emily already suspected. "Accidents happen, my dear, especially to people who ask too many questions." The car violently swayed on a sharp curve, and Emily had to hold on to avoid being thrown to the side. It was at that moment she realized that Harrison had strategically positioned himself between her and the door leading to the other cars. The situation was rapidly slipping out of her control. "You can't simply make people disappear when they discover your crimes," Emily said, trying to keep her voice steady. "There are other people who know the truth. Olivia wasn't the only one." "Olivia?" Harrison laughed coldly. "Poor Olivia. She was always very loyal until she started asking inconvenient questions. But don't worry, she's in a place where she won't bother anyone anymore." Emily's blood froze. "What did you do to her?" "Let's say she decided to take an extended vacation." "Very extended." Harrison's smile was now purely predatory. "And you, my dear Emily, are about to make the same decision." Emily tried to maneuver her chair to move away, but the limited space in the car gave her no room to move. Her fingers tightened on the folder of documents, her only weapon in that desperate situation. "These documents have already been copied," she said, raising the folder. "Even if something happens to me, the truth will come out." "Oh, Emily, always so hopeful." Harrison moved closer. "Do you really think anyone will believe the ramblings of a young woman traumatized by her father's disappearance, especially after they discover she had been struggling with deep depression?" "Depression?" Emily initially didn't understand. Of course, everyone will be very sad when they learn that poor Emily Parker, devastated by the loss of her father, decided to end her own suffering during a train ride through the mountains, Harrison explained with calculated coldness. A desperate gesture, understandable to those who knew of her emotional fragility. The realization of Harrison's plan hit Emily like a punch to the stomach. He not only intended to eliminate her, but had already constructed an entire narrative to justify her disappearance. The official version was already prepared, and no one would question the version of a respected man in society about the mental state of a young orphan. "You're a monster," Emily whispered. "I'm a businessman," Harrison corrected. "And some businesses require drastic measures. The dam you criticize so much will bring billions in investments to this region, thousands of jobs, economic development. The sacrifice of a few families is a small price to pay for progress. And my family? What was our crime? Your father was too smart for his own good. He started making connections, understanding that the contracts he was signing were part of something bigger. When he realized he was being used to legitimize the sale of lands necessary for the project, he wanted to back out. Harrison paused, watching the landscape through the window. Men of principle are a nuisance in modern business. The train began to slow down as it approached a narrow bridge that crossed a deep valley. It was one of the most photographed points of the entire route, but also one of the most dangerous. Emily had known that part of the journey since childhood. She knew that the abyss extended more than 50 yards below the tracks. "Please, Harrison," she tried one last appeal. "We can find a solution. You can keep part of the profits, but you don't need to destroy the entire region." "I've already found my solution," he replied, moving toward the car door. With a quick movement, he unlocked the external door, the one that led directly to the outside of the train. The mountain wind invaded the car, bringing with it the amplified sound of the wheels on the tracks and the echo of the abyss. "Harrison, no!" Emily shouted, but her words were lost in the roar of the wind. "Your depression finally won, Emily." "What a tragedy," he said, approaching the wheelchair. "But don't worry, I'll take very good care of the family business." In a calculated and cowardly move, Harrison pushed Emily's chair toward the open door. The impact was violent, and the young woman was thrown into the void, plummeting down the steep slope while her wheelchair shattered against the rocks. The last sound she heard before losing consciousness was the distant whistle of the train moving away, taking with it the man who had destroyed her family. A few yards from the dirt road that bordered that stretch of the railway, a majestic black horse calmly grazed among the centuries-old trees of the Blue Ridge Mountains. Known in the region as Thunder, that animal carried a reputation that bordered on mysticism. Many said he wasn't just a wild horse, but a guardian of the mountains, a free spirit that appeared at the most improbable moments. The older residents told stories about Thunder that defied logic. They said he had saved lost travelers in storms, guided stray children back to their homes, and even warned families about imminent landslides. Old Frank, an elderly farmer in the region, always claimed that Thunder wasn't an ordinary horse. He was a four-legged angel sent by the mountains themselves to protect those in need. That foggy morning, as the tourist train cut through the mountainous landscape, Thunder raised his head with sudden restlessness. His ears moved quickly, capturing sounds that humans couldn't perceive. There was something different in the air, a disturbance in the natural harmony of the forest. The metallic sound of the train was familiar, but that morning brought with it a dissonance that made all the animal's muscles tense. In a few seconds, the sound of an impact echoed across the slope. Something had fallen from the railway line, rolling through the dense vegetation of the forest. Thunder immediately abandoned his peaceful grazing and trotted in the direction where he perceived the disturbance. His hooves touched the uneven ground with the confidence of one who knew every stone, every root, every inch of that rugged terrain. He crossed narrow trails, avoided fallen trunks, and jumped over rocks with an agility that seemed supernatural. That's how he found Emily, unconscious, fallen among broken branches and dry leaves. Her wheelchair lay shattered a few yards away, a heap of twisted metal that told of the violence of the impact. The young woman had rolled down the slope until she was cushioned by a group of dense bushes, which probably saved her life by softening the fall. Thunder approached cautiously, lowering his imposing head to examine the motionless figure. His muzzle gently touched Emily's face, and she moaned softly, showing signs of life. The horse remained still for a few moments, as if assessing the situation with an intelligence that transcended animal instinct. Emily slowly opened her eyes, feeling a pain that spread throughout her body. Her vision was blurred, but she could distinguish the majestic silhouette of the black horse in front of her. For a moment, she thought she was dreaming, or perhaps had already left this world. "Are you real?" she whispered, extending a trembling hand toward the animal. Thunder whinnied softly as if answering her question. Then, in a decision that seemed guided by a superior wisdom, he carefully positioned himself beside Emily, lowering himself as much as possible to allow her to lean on his back. "I can't get up," Emily murmured, realizing that her legs were completely immobilized after the impact. "I don't have the strength." But Thunder seemed to understand her situation perfectly. With delicate and precise movements, he helped her position herself on his back, waiting patiently while she settled. When he finally felt she was secure, he rose slowly and began his journey along the dirt road. The trip to Mr. Frank's farm took almost an hour. Thunder walked with extra care, avoiding jolts that could cause more pain to his passenger. Emily drifted between consciousness and fainting, but in her lucid moments, she felt the comforting strength of the animal carrying her as if she were the most precious being in the world. "Where are you taking me?" she asked during a moment of greater clarity. Thunder just continued his cadenced pace, as if he knew exactly where to go. And he really did. His connection with those lands was deep, ancestral. He knew every family, every house, every kind heart that inhabited the region, and at that moment, he knew that Emily needed to reach people who could care for her with the dedication her situation required. Mr. Frank and Mrs. Betty's farm appeared on the horizon like an oasis of hope. It was a modest property, but impeccably maintained, with an adobe house surrounded by verdant gardens and a flowering orchard. The couple, already in their 70s, had dedicated their lives to the land and animals, developing a reputation for kindness that extended throughout the region. Mrs. Betty was feeding the chickens when she spotted Thunder's unmistakable silhouette approaching, but her surprise was complete when she realized that the horse was carrying a young woman on his back. "Frank! Frank, come quick!" she shouted, running toward the gate. "Thunder brought someone!" Mr. Frank emerged from the house, still adjusting his hat, but his expression completely changed when he saw the scene. "Good Lord, it's Emily, John Parker's daughter." Together, the couple helped Emily descend from Thunder, carrying her into the house with all possible care. The young woman was semi-conscious, with scratches and bruises all over her body, but alive, miraculously alive. "What happened to you, my child?" Mrs. Betty asked, preparing compresses while Mr. Frank fetched the homemade remedies he always kept on hand. Emily tried to speak, but the words came out confused, jumbled by the concussion and trauma. Only one thing remained clear in her mind. Harrison Morris had tried to eliminate her, and somehow, through the intervention of an almost mystical horse, she had survived to tell the truth. Thunder remained in the farmyard, grazing peacefully as if his mission had been accomplished. But his intelligent eyes remained alert, as if he knew that Emily's story was just beginning. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit like. Tell us what city you're watching from. We continue. Emily awoke 3 days later, in a simple but comfortable bed, surrounded by the aroma of medicinal herbs and freshly brewed coffee. Soft morning light entered through the flowered curtains of Mrs. Betty's guest room, and for the first time since the incident on the train, she felt safe. "Thank God you're awake, my child," Mrs. Betty whispered, approaching with a steaming bowl. "I was starting to get worried. 3 days without talking properly, just murmuring about trains and documents." 3 days? Emily tried to sit up, but an intense pain in her ribs made her groan. I need to notify the authorities." Harrison tried to... "Easy, girl, take it slow." Mr. Frank entered the room carrying a cup of tea. "We already know who you are. Emily Parker, daughter of the late John. Good family, good people. But before you talk about what happened, you need to recover properly." Emily accepted the tea, feeling the hot liquid soothe her parched throat. Gradually, the memories of the last few days began to reorganize in her mind. The confrontation with Harrison, the fall from the train, the miraculous rescue by Thunder. Everything seemed like a nightmare, but the pains in her body confirmed it had been a terrible reality. "My bag." "The documents," she said, suddenly alarmed. "We didn't find anything, my child. Just you injured in the middle of the woods," Mrs. Betty replied sadly. "Thunder brought you here like an angel, but there was nothing else." Emily closed her eyes, feeling the weight of the loss. All the documents she had meticulously gathered for months, all the evidence against Harrison, had been lost in the fall. Without them, Her word against that of a respected man in society was worth very little. "There's one more thing you need to know," Mr. Frank said hesitantly. "In town, they're saying that you disappeared during the train trip. That you were very sad about the loss of your father and that I threw myself from the train," Emily completed, immediately understanding the narrative that Harrison had constructed. He planned everything, even the version he would tell afterward. Mrs. Betty held her hand affectionately. "We didn't believe it for a second. We've known your family for years. Your father was a man of integrity and you inherited that strength from him." While Emily was assimilating the situation 40 miles away, at the Millbrook Sheriff's Office, Sheriff Barnett was having his own suspicions about the case. A veteran of the county police with more than 20 years of experience, he had learned to distrust stories that seemed too convenient. "So, the young woman simply jumped from the train?" he asked the clerk who was organizing the initial report. "That's what Mr. Harrison Morris says. He was in the same car, tried to prevent it, but couldn't. He said she had been showing signs of deep depression since her father's loss." Barnett drummed his fingers on the desk thoughtfully. "And the body?" "Hasn't been found yet. The region is very rugged, full of dense forest. Could have fallen anywhere." "Or may not have fallen anywhere," Barnett muttered. "I want to go to the location where she supposedly jumped, and I want to talk to all the other train passengers." "Sheriff, Mr. Morris is a very respected person in town. Successful businessman, philanthropist, and that should stop me from investigating." Barnett raised an eyebrow. "Respected people can also lie, Charlie, especially when they have a lot to lose." The next morning, Barnett headed to the location indicated by Harrison as being the point where Emily had jumped from the train. It was indeed an isolated area, with dense vegetation and rugged terrain, but something immediately caught his attention. "Look at that," he said to himself, kneeling near the tracks. Horse tracks, very fresh. The tracks followed a trail that descended the slope, clearly marked in the damp earth. Barnett followed the trail for a few yards, finding signs that something heavy had rolled through the vegetation. Broken branches, overturned leaves, marks in the earth. Someone definitely fell here, he concluded, but not necessarily jumped. Further on, he found the wreckage of a wheelchair, confirming that Emily had indeed fallen at that location. But the horse's tracks told a different story from the official version. If she had died in the fall, the horse wouldn't have approached, Barnett reasoned aloud. Horses avoid places with the smell of blood and... He stopped, realizing the implication, unless she was alive. Back at the sheriff's office, Barnett began collecting information about Harrison Morris. What he discovered intrigued him even more. In recent months, several people had made comments about suspicious changes in the Parker family business. Small producers complained of pressure to sell their lands, questionable contracts, and rumors about a large project that no one could properly explain. "Sheriff?" Charlie entered the room with a worried expression. "I just received a strange call. A woman saying she knows the truth about the Emily Parker case, but that she'll only speak in person. Said her name is Teresa and that she worked for the family." Barnett straightened in his chair. "Teresa, the Parker's housekeeper. She didn't give her last name, just that you should meet her at the main church tonight after the 7 o'clock mass." "Interesting," Barnett smiled for the first time since the case had begun. "Very interesting. It seems I'm not the only one who distrusts the official version of the facts." Meanwhile, at Mr. Frank's farm, Emily was finally able to sit up for longer periods. Her mind worked feverishly, trying to find a way to prove what had happened. Without the original documents, she would need to reconstruct her entire investigation from scratch. "Mrs. Betty," she called when the lady entered with lunch. "Do you know anyone in town we can trust? Someone who can help us without alerting?" "Harrison? I do know someone, my child. Sheriff Barnett is an honest man. He's helped many ordinary folks around here, never sold out to the powerful," Mrs. Betty responded. "Why don't we talk to him?" Emily smiled for the first time in days. Perhaps not all was lost. If she could convince an honest investigator to hear her version of the facts, there was still hope of doing justice to her father's name and preventing Harrison from continuing to harm other families. Millbrook's main church was silent when Sheriff Barnett arrived a few minutes before 8 in the evening. The 7 o'clock Mass had ended, and only a few votive candles illuminated the environment with a warm, welcoming golden light. In the pews closest to the altar, a woman of about 60 was waiting, her hands clasped over a worn leather purse. "Teresa?" he asked, approaching discreetly. The woman nodded, looking nervously from side to side. "Sheriff Barnett, thank God you came. I didn't know who else to turn to. You said you know the truth about Emily Parker. Can you tell me?" Teresa took a deep breath, as if gathering courage to break a silence she had carried for a long time. "I worked for the Parker family for 15 years. I watched Emily grow up, cared for her when she was confined to a wheelchair after that childhood accident. That girl is not suicidal, Sheriff. She's a fighter." "Go on." Barnett sat down beside her, sensing that the woman was genuinely frightened. "In the last few weeks before what happened to her, Emily had been asking many questions about her father's business. She spent hours in the office going through documents, making calls. She discovered something, Sheriff. Something that made Mr. Morris very nervous." "How do you mean nervous?" "He started showing up at the house almost every day, always with excuses to talk to Emily. But I heard the arguments. He tried to convince her to leave the business to him, said it was too complicated for a young woman to understand." Teresa paused, wiping away a tear. "She wouldn't accept it. She said her father had left clues that something was wrong." Barnett leaned forward, interested. "What kind of clues?" "Hidden documents, strange notes. Mr. Parker was a meticulous man, Sheriff. In the last months before passing, he had become suspicious, paranoid. He even told me he didn't trust Harrison, that he was discovering serious irregularities in the contracts." "And do you believe this had some connection to his accident?" Teresa looked around the church, making sure they were alone. "Sheriff, I might be talking nonsense, but Mr. Parker knew these roads better than anyone. He'd been driving them for 30 years. How does a man like that simply lose control of his car on a curve he'd taken thousands of times?" Teresa's words echoed the same suspicions that Barnett had harbored from the beginning. Two members of the same family, both with suspicions about Harrison Morris, both victims of convenient accidents. "There's one more thing, Sheriff," Teresa continued. "The night before the train trip, I overheard a telephone conversation of Mr. Morris. He was in the office talking about eliminating the problem and ensuring there would be no more interference. I thought it was about business, but now—" "Can you repeat exactly what you heard?" "He said something like, 'Tomorrow solves everything. After that, there will be no one left to ask inconvenient questions. The project can move forward without obstacles.'" Teresa took a deep breath. "Sheriff, I think they wanted to eliminate Emily because she discovered something very serious." Barnett made mental notes of every detail. "They?" "Mr. Morris wasn't working alone. In recent weeks, strange men appeared at the mansion several times, foreigners by their way of speaking, always in closed meetings in the office. And there was a woman too, a lawyer named Ms. Christina, who showed up with documents to sign." "Do you know what project they were talking about?" "Something about a dam. I heard fragments of conversations about expropriations, compensations, international companies. Mr. Parker was against it, but Mr. Morris insisted it would be good for the region." Barnett thanked Teresa for the information and promised to keep her identity confidential. When she left, he remained in the church for a few minutes, organizing his thoughts. Everything was beginning to make sense. A dam project that required buying land, an honest partner who discovered irregularities, and an ambitious man willing to do anything to ensure the success of the enterprise. Meanwhile, at Mr. Frank's farm, Emily had recovered enough strength to stand with the help of improvised crutches. Her determination grew each day, fueled by the need for justice and the certainty that Harrison would not stop there. "Mr. Frank," she said, as they had breakfast the next morning, "you know the region well, don't you? You know all the properties, the old paths." "I do indeed, girl. I was born and raised here. Why do you ask?" "I need to get back to my family's mansion. There are documents there that can prove what Harrison is doing, but I can't use the main entrance." Mr. Frank scratched his beard, thoughtful. "It would be very dangerous, girl. They must be watching." "The property," There must be another way. Old trails, paths that only long-time residents know. Well, he said slowly, there is a passage that hasn't been used in many years. Under the old barn of the neighboring farm, there's a tunnel that moonshiners used in the last century as an escape route. It led directly to the back of the Parker property. Emily felt her heart race. Does that tunnel still exist? It should. It was built in stone to last. But it's been decades since anyone used it. It could be obstructed, dangerous. It doesn't matter. It's my only chance to recover. The evidence I need. Mrs. Betty, who was listening to the conversation, approached with concern. My child, you can barely walk. How do you plan to get through an abandoned tunnel? I'll manage, Emily replied with determination. I can't stay here waiting while Harrison destroys everything my father worked for, and if this tunnel really exists, I can reach his office without being seen. Mr. Frank sighed. If you're decided, I can show you where the entrance is, but you'll need help. That tunnel is almost a mile long. Thunder can help. Me, Emily said, looking out the window where the horse grazed peacefully. He brought me here, maybe he can take me back. Girl, are you talking about using a wild horse to enter an underground tunnel? Thunder isn't an ordinary horse, you said so yourself. He seems to understand what I need. At that moment, as if he had heard his name, Thunder approached the kitchen window, poking his head inside the house. His intelligent eyes fixed on Emily, and she had the strange sensation that he really understood what was being discussed. All right, Mr. Frank yielded. I'll show you where the tunnel entrance is, but we'll only go at night, when we're sure no one is watching. Emily smiled, feeling for the first time since the accident that she had a real chance to reverse the situation. Harrison had tried to silence her permanently, but he had underestimated her determination. And now, with the help of kind people and an almost mystical horse, she was about to begin her journey back to justice. Tonight, she said, looking at Thunder, tonight we return home. The new moon left the night particularly dark when Emily, Mr. Frank, and Thunder silently made their way across the fields to the abandoned farm. The old barn stood like a ghostly shadow against the starry sky, its boards weathered by time telling stories of a long-forgotten era. The entrance is right down here, Mr. Frank whispered, pointing to an area where the wooden floor seemed different from the other boards. My grandfather showed me this when I was a boy, said it saved many lives during the revolts of the last century. Carefully, they lifted the loose boards, revealing an opening that descended into darkness. The air rising from the tunnel was fresh but laden with history and moisture. Emily felt a shiver, not of fear but of determination. Are you sure about this, girl? Mr. Frank asked one last time. There's still time to go back and think of another plan. There is no other plan, Emily replied, stroking Thunder's neck. It's now or never. Thunder sniffed the tunnel entrance, his nostrils dilating as he processed the odors coming from below. Then, surprisingly, he began to descend the stone steps with the same confidence with which he had crossed the mountains to save her. Unbelievable, Mr. Frank murmured. It's as if he knows exactly what you're doing. Emily followed Thunder, using her hands to support herself on the stone walls. Her legs still didn't fully support her weight, but adrenaline and determination kept her moving. The flashlight Mr. Frank had lent her illuminated the path ahead, revealing a well-built tunnel with stone arches that had withstood the test of time. I remember your grandfather, she said, her voice echoing softly in the confined space. He used to tell stories about the moonshiners and the secret paths of the mountains. I never imagined I'd one day need to use one of them. As they advanced, Emily began to notice something strange. The tunnel wasn't as abandoned as expected. In some places, there were signs of recent passage, footprints in the dust, tire marks from some kind of small vehicle, even modern electrical cables fixed to the walls. Someone is using this tunnel, she whispered, stopping to examine the cables. And recently? Thunder stopped too, his ears moving nervously. The horse seemed to sense something that Emily had not yet perceived. Then, from somewhere ahead, muffled sounds of human voices reached them. Emily immediately turned off the flashlight, leaving them in total darkness. Thunder didn't move an inch, as if perfectly understanding the need for absolute silence. They remained motionless for several minutes, listening. "The project needs to be accelerated," said a male voice with a foreign accent. "After the incident with the heiress, we can't take any more risks." "We're already working on it," responded a female voice that Emily recognized. It was Ms. Christina, the lawyer Teresa had mentioned. "But we need to be careful with the papers. The sheriff is asking inconvenient questions." "Then perhaps it's time he also has an accident," suggested a third voice, definitely Harrison's. Emily's blood ran cold. They were planning something against Sheriff Barnett, and she was the only person who could warn him. But first she needed to find out more about this meeting and why they were using the secret tunnel. Slowly, guiding Thunder only by touch, she advanced toward the voices. About 50 yards ahead, a faint light revealed an underground chamber that had clearly been adapted for meetings. Tables, chairs, computers, stacks of documents, and maps on the walls. This is their operations center, she realized. They're coordinating everything from here. On the walls, detailed maps showed not only the location of the future dam, but also all the properties that would need to be expropriated. Red circles marked the homes of people who had refused to sell, and there were photographs of these families attached to the maps. "The dam is just the beginning," the foreign voice continued. "Once we have total control of the region, we can expand to other projects. Mining, wind energy, real estate development. This region could be worth billions." "And what do we do with the families who refuse to leave?" asked Ms. Christina. "Accidents happen," Harrison replied coldly. "Like what happened to John Parker when he started asking too many questions. Like what should have definitely happened to his daughter." Emily had to cover her mouth to keep from screaming. The confirmation that they had been responsible for her father's death hit her like a punch to the stomach. But at the same time, she now had the proof she needed. They had just confessed to everything. "I need to record this," she thought, discreetly searching for her cell phone. But she realized she had lost it in the fall from the train. Then she noticed something better. One of the computers on the table was recording the meeting. Thunder seemed to perceive her intentions and moved silently to a position that would give her better access to the underground chamber. Emily slid from his back and, using all her strength, crawled to the entrance of the underground chamber. "The problem is that we don't know if she's really dead," Ms. Christina was saying. "No body has been found. And now there are rumors that people have seen horse tracks in the region." "Thunder," Harrison grumbled. "That horse has been a local legend for decades. If Emily survived, he might have taken her somewhere safe." "Then we need to find her before she talks to the authorities," the foreigner said. "Our sources in the police say Sheriff Barnett is suspicious. We need to act quickly." Emily realized she was in a dangerous position. If she were discovered, there was no way to escape quickly, but she also knew this was her only chance to obtain concrete evidence. Slowly, she stretched toward the computer, trying to access the recording file. At that moment, Thunder whinnied softly as a warning. Footsteps echoed in the tunnel. Someone was coming. "Someone's coming," Harrison said, immediately alert. "Impossible. Nobody knows about this place," Ms. Christina responded. But the footsteps were approaching. Emily realized they were human footsteps, not Thunder's. Someone else had discovered the secret tunnel and was approaching the underground chamber. "Hide the documents now," the foreigner ordered. The movement in the chamber became frantic. Emily took advantage of the confusion to grab a flash drive that was connected to the computer, quickly pocketing it. Then, with an agility she didn't know she still possessed, she returned to Thunder. "Let's go, boy," she whispered. "We have what we came for." But as they tried to silently move away, the approaching footsteps became clearer, and Emily recognized the voice that echoed through the tunnel. "Police, nobody move!" It was Sheriff Barnett, and he wasn't alone. The sound of several pairs of boots indicated he had brought reinforcements, but this also meant that Emily and Thunder were trapped between two groups with no obvious escape route. The situation had become much more complex, and Emily realized the next few minutes would determine not just her fate, but that of the entire investigation. The tunnel echoed, with the sound of voices and footsteps running in different directions. Emily remained next to Thunder, holding the flash drive as if it were her salvation. while the police flashlights approached from one side and the conspirators tried to escape from the other. "There's no way out," shouted Sheriff Barnett. "The boom tunnel is surrounded." Harrison's voice cut through the darkness, laden with desperation. "How did they find this place?" "Teresa told us about the strange sounds she heard coming from beneath the mansion," Barnett replied, his voice echoing, "off the stone walls. And when we cross-referenced that information with old maps of the region, it wasn't hard to find the entrance." Emily realized this was her opportunity. Taking a deep breath, she shouted, "Sheriff Barnett, it's me, Emily Parker. I'm alive." The silence that followed was deafening. Then Harrison's voice exploded in fury. "Impossible, you should be dead?" Emily stood up, leaning on Thunder. "Like my father should be. Sorry to disappoint you, Harrison, but I survived to tell the truth." The flashlights finally converged on the underground chamber, revealing the complete scene. Harrison, Miss Christina, and the foreign man were cornered, surrounded by documents, maps, and evidence of their conspiracy. "Emily?" Barnett couldn't hide his surprise. Where have you been all these days?" "Being cared for by kind people who saved me when this man tried to eliminate me." Emily pointed at Harrison, "and discovering the truth about what happened to my father." "You have no proof of anything." Harrison tried to maintain his composure, but his voice trembled. Emily held up the flash drive. "Yes, I do. Recordings of you confessing that you murdered my father because he discovered the dam scheme. Plans to eliminate Sheriff Barnett, and evidence of an international conspiracy to illegally appropriate land in the region." Ms. Christina tried to approach Emily, but Thunder positioned himself protectively between them, whinnying threateningly. "That horse," the foreigner muttered. "It's as if he's been protecting her from the beginning." "Thunder isn't just a horse," Emily smiled, stroking the animal's neck. "He's the guardian of these mountains, and he appeared exactly when I needed him most." Barnett approached cautiously. "Emily, can you give me that flash drive? It's crucial evidence for the case." "Of course, Sheriff, but there's more. In the last few days, Mr. Frank and Mrs. Betty helped me reconstruct the investigations my father had done. We discovered that this dam would be just the first step in a much larger project." She pointed to the maps on the wall. "They wanted to transform the entire Blue Ridge region into an industrial complex. Dam mining, deforestation, billions of dollars in profits, but at the cost of completely destroying the region's ecosystem. And for that," Harrison finally exploded, "some people needed to get out of the way. Your father was an idealist, Emily. He didn't understand that progress demands sacrifices." "Sacrifices?" Emily turned to him, her voice laden with emotion. "You call murdering innocent people a sacrifice? Destroying entire families? Contaminating the water that supplies thousands of people?" "He's confessing," Barnett whispered to his deputies, who were recording everything. But Emily wasn't finished. "There's something you don't know. My father didn't just trust physical documents. He created a digital backup system with all the evidence automatically activated if something happened to him." Harrison's face turned completely pale. "During all these months that you thought you were safe, the system was collecting more evidence. All the bank transfers, all the fake contracts, all the communications with foreign companies. Everything was documented and automatically sent to federal authorities." "That's a lie," Ms. Christina stammered. "It's the truth," a new voice echoed through the tunnel. It was Olivia, the secretary everyone thought had disappeared. "John Parker asked me to configure that system before he left us, and it was activated the day after his disappearance." "Olivia," Emily exclaimed, "you're okay." "I've been in hiding, gathering more evidence, and now I have everything we need to bring down not just this project, but the entire network of corruption that supports it." The foreigner, who had remained silent, finally spoke. "You have no idea what you're destroying. This project could develop the entire region." "By destroying it first," Emily replied. "True development doesn't need lies, blackmail, and the elimination of innocent people." Barnett began to handcuff the conspirators. "Harrison Morris, Christina Sanders, Klaus Hoffman, you're under arrest for conspiracy, fraud, money laundering and, he looked at Emily, attempted murder. And murder, Emily added softly. Don't forget my father. When they finally exited the tunnel, dawn was painting the Millbrook Mountains with golden hues. Emily, still supported by thunder, observed the landscape she had almost lost forever. Sheriff, she said, I want all the families who were pressured to sell their lands to be compensated, and for this dam project to be definitively cancelled. With the evidence we have, that will be possible, Barnett assured her. And there's one more thing. The federal prosecutor's office was already investigating suspicious movements of foreign companies in the region. Your case will help dismantle an entire network of environmental crimes. Months later, Emily was back at the family mansion, but now as one of the leading environmental activists in America. The case had gained national attention, and she used her experience to protect other communities from similar schemes. Harrison and his accomplices were sentenced to long prison terms. The affected families received fair compensation, and the Blue Ridge region was declared a permanent environmental protection area. You saved not just your own life, but this entire region, Mr. Frank said, visiting Emily at her new environmental foundation. I didn't save it alone, Emily replied, looking out the window where thunder grazed freely in the fields. I had help from extraordinary people, and from a horse that seems to have been sent by the spirits of the mountains themselves. Thunder raised his head as if he had heard his name and trotted to the window. Emily opened the door and he entered the room, something he never did with other people. I think you two were destined for each other, Mrs. Betty observed, moved. Perhaps. Emily smiled, embracing the neck of the horse that had saved her life. Or perhaps Thunder really is what they've always said, a guardian of the mountains who appears when nature most needs protection. Outside, the Millbrook Mountains rose majestically against the blue sky, their forests preserved, their rivers clean, and their communities safe. And on the trails that crossed the mountains, a black horse could still occasionally be seen, always vigilant, always ready to protect those in need. Justice had triumphed, but more important than that, love for the land and for the people who inhabited it had prevailed over greed and unbridled ambition. And that, Emily knew, was the true victory. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit like.